There is a road in the Mojave Desert that does not exist. That is the official position. Check the federal maps, the state highway index, the county road inventories, nothing. Pull up a satellite image and you can see it. 2 lanes of engineered asphalt cutting through 40 miles of empty desert with the kind of geometric confidence that costs serious money. The road has curved transitions, it has drainage culverts, it has a prepared base that survives decades of thermal punishment without crumbling. Someone built this road correctly, completely, and then someone else made sure you would never find it on a map. This is the story of how that happens and why it matters. The road that shouldn't exist. The first thing you notice is the quality. This is important because most forgotten desert roads are not good roads. They are mining tracks, ranch access roads, Bureau of Land Management maintenance paths scraped into the dirt with a single grader pass and left to whatever the desert decides to do with them. They wash out, they heave, they develop the kind of potholes that remove your fillings if you push past 15 miles an hour. You drive them in a high clearance truck and you are still not entirely confident you will make it back out. This road is different. The asphalt is thick, not the thin chip seal you see on county roads that have been repaved 6 times over 60 years, each layer thinner than the last, the whole sandwich gradually losing structural integrity until a good rainstorm opens sinkholes in the passing lane. This is poured asphalt with an engineered base underneath it, compacted in lifts the way you do when you are building something to last. Someone dug down. Someone put in aggregate, someone ran compaction equipment over every inch of the subgrade before a drop of asphalt went down. The shoulders are cut and shaped, not just where the pavement ends and the desert begins, but deliberately beveled to manage water runoff in a desert, where it rains maybe 4 inches a year. Someone was thinking about what happens to this road when it does rain, which means someone was thinking about this road being here for a very long time. The center line is gone. That is the only concession to age. Whatever paint marked the lanes has long since bleached out of existence by a sun that treats painted surfaces as a personal challenge. But the lane width is still there in the geometry. 12 feet per lane, standard federal highway specification. Not 10, not 11, not whatever fit between the rocks. 12, measured, intentional. There are culverts under the road at every wash crossing. Corrugated metal pipes, the serious kind, sized for flow rates that almost never occur in this drainage area, but could theoretically occur once every 50-year storm event. Hydraulic engineers call this designing for the 50-year storm. It is what you do when you are building public infrastructure that needs to survive without maintenance for decades. It is not what you do for a road to a mine. It is not what you do for a road to nowhere. It is what you do when you expect the road to matter. And yet, no map, no sign, no designation, no name, just 40 miles of excellent asphalt, beginning at a cattle guard on a state highway and ending, as we will get to, at a place that raises more questions than it answers. The desert it cuts through. To understand why this road is strange, you have to understand the landscape it crosses, because the landscape does not invite roads. It does not invite much of anything. The Mojave High Desert, in the stretch of San Bernardino County, between the Providence Mountains and the Nevada border, is one of the least visited pieces of terrain in the contiguous United States. Not least visited in the way that a remote national park is least visited, where you still see 30 cars at the trailhead and a ranger station with a gift shop. Least visited in the way that if you drive off the interstate and point your vehicle north for 40 miles, there is a meaningful chance that no other human being will see you do it. The land is federal. Most of it is managed by the Bureau of Land Management, which manages it primarily by leaving it alone. Summer temperatures here regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground temperature runs higher than that. There is a documented phenomenon in this part of the desert where the soil surface reaches temperatures that can cause second-degree burns through the sole of a standard shoe. The kind of boot you need to walk comfortably on the ground in July in this particular corner of the Mojave is the kind of boot that most people do not own and would not think to bring. Most people do not come here in July. Most people do not come here at all. The vegetation is creosote bush, which is essentially the desert's way of saying it has given up on diversity. Creosote grows everywhere that nothing else will, and in the Mojave it grows in near monoculture across hundreds of square miles, interrupted occasionally by a Joshua tree, a cholla cactus, a dry wash lined with desert willow. It is beautiful in the specific way that utterly alien landscapes are beautiful, which is to say, it looks like something you would find on Mars, which is either thrilling or profoundly unsettling, depending on your relationship with desolation. There is no water. I want to be precise about this because the absence of water in the Mojave is not the absence of water the way your kitchen faucet runs dry when there is a plumbing problem. It is the structural, geological, foundational absence of water across an area the size of a small state. The springs that exist are mapped and known and precious and nowhere near the road we are discussing. The nearest town, with a functioning gas station, is 60 miles from the road's northern terminus. I want you to hold that number for a moment. 60 miles. That is not a detour. That is a commitment. Into this landscape, someone threaded 40 miles of engineered highway, and they did it based on the physical evidence in a single construction effort, not a road that grew in stages as some mining operation expanded. Not a road that was patched and extended over decades. The base material and asphalt composition are consistent across the entire length. This was one project, one budget, one decision, and someone made that decision and then apparently decided that the world did not need to know about it. Who builds a road like this? Let me tell you what a road like this costs, because the cost is the first clue about who built it. In the 1960s and 1970s, which is the most likely construction window based on the asphalt composition and culvert specifications, a mile of two-lane engineered highway in remote desert terrain cost somewhere between $80,000 and $150,000 depending on conditions. That range reflects the variance between moderately difficult terrain and the kind of terrain where you are moving serious rock and bridging significant washes. The road we are discussing crosses terrain that falls toward the difficult end of that spectrum. 40 miles, call it $100,000 per mile at the midpoint of that range. That is $4 million in 1965 money. Adjusted for inflation, you are looking at the equivalent of roughly $40 million today. $40 million for a road that serves no mapped destination, connects to no named highway system, and appears in no public record of infrastructure spending. That amount of money does not come from a county road budget. San Bernardino County's entire road budget in the 1960s was not large enough to absorb a project of this scale without it appearing prominently in every public record from that decade. It doesn't come from a mining company either. Mining companies build cheap roads. They build exactly enough road to get the ore out, and the moment the ore stops coming, they stop maintaining it, and the desert takes it back within a decade. They do not build roads to last 50 years in terrain they're not actively using. There are essentially three categories of entity that build roads to this specification in remote federal land without public announcement. The first is the federal government under a military or national security program. The second is the federal government under a resource extraction program that was classified or sensitive. The third is a private entity working under a federal contract with confidentiality requirements. In all three cases, you get the same outcome. An excellent road, no map, no sign, a paper trail that either does not exist or exists somewhere you are not authorized to look. The road's alignment is also telling. It does not wander. Terrain-following roads, the kind that organic human activity produces, bend around obstacles, climb toward passes, drift toward water sources. They have the meandering logic of something that evolved over time, each deviation reflecting some historical reason that may or may not still apply. This road does not do that. It runs with the purposeful geometry of a road whose alignment was determined on a drafting table by someone who had already decided exactly where it needed to go and then figured out the most direct way to get there. Someone knew the destination before they built the road. That sounds obvious, but it is actually the most important thing I have said so far. The government's fingerprints. Here's where this gets complicated. And I say that as someone who genuinely enjoys complicated, which is probably a character flaw but has served me well in this particular line of work. The land the road crosses is administered by three different federal entities depending on which section you are standing on. Bureau of Land Management for the majority of it, a narrow corridor that falls within the boundary of a military operations area, and a small section near the northern terminus that is technically within the withdrawal boundary of a federal research installation that was established in the 1950s and whose current operational status is, to put it charitably, unclear. Military operations areas in the Mojave are not unusual. The desert is full of them. China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station covers nearly 18,000 square miles of the western Mojave. The National Training Center at Fort Irwin is another 1,000,000 acres of desert set aside for the Army. Edwards Air Force Base sits on more than 300,000 acres of the Antelope Valley. The military likes the Mojave because it is empty, because the weather is flyable most of the year, and because you can do things there that you cannot do anywhere near people. The road touches, but does not enter, one of these zones. It runs along the boundary for approximately 8 miles before angling away to the north. That boundary alignment is not an accident. Someone plotted this road to stay outside the restricted area while maintaining proximity to it. That is the kind of surveying decision you make when you need access that is legally outside a boundary, but functionally related to what is inside it. The paper trail, such as it is, surfaces in fragments. A 1967 Bureau of Land Management right-of-way file in the San Bernardino field office references a road construction permit issued to a federal agency whose name has been redacted in the copy that is publicly accessible. The redaction is not a black bar, which would be dramatic and satisfying. It is simply a blank space where text should be, as if whoever processed the document for public release decided the cleanest approach was to remove the letters entirely rather than cover them. The blank space is, in its own way, more unsettling than a black bar. A black bar says we are hiding something. A blank space says we have decided you do not need to know what was here. A 1972 topographic quadrangle map produced by the United States Geological Survey shows the road. It is marked as an unimproved road, which anyone who has driven it will tell you is an almost comic understatement, but it is there. The 1982 edition of the same quadrangle does not show it. Between 1972 and 1982, the road was removed from the official federal mapping record. The road itself was not removed, just its representation on the map. The decision to remove a feature from a USGS topographic map requires a specific internal process. It is not something that happens accidentally. A cartographer does not simply forget 40 miles of highway. Someone requested the removal, someone approved it. There is somewhere a piece of paper authorizing the erasure of this road from the public record. That piece of paper has not surfaced. The people who remember maps forget. People are harder to edit. There is a woman in Needles, California, who is 81 years old and has lived in the Mojave her entire life. Her name is not important for this story, and she asked me not to use it, which is a request I am going to respect, even though it makes me sound like a journalist, and I am mostly just someone who drives around the desert asking people uncomfortable questions. She remembers the road being built. She was in her 20s. She remembers the equipment coming through on flatbed trucks, remembers the dust columns rising above the creosote for weeks, remembers her father, who ran a small garage in a town that is itself now mostly gone, being asked to provide fuel and minor mechanical services to the construction crew. She remembers two things specifically. The crew was not local. The men who built this road did not come from San Bernardino County or Riverside County or anywhere else in the surrounding region. They were brought in from somewhere else, housed in temporary facilities she never saw, and gone within what she estimates was about 8 months. And the second thing, nobody talked about what they were building. She asked one of the workers at her father's garage what the road was for. He told her he was not authorized to say. She was 22 years old, and a construction worker in the Mojave Desert told her he was not authorized to say what road he was building. That is a sentence that takes a moment to sit with. There is also a retired surveyor who spent 30 years doing contract work for various federal agencies across the Mojave and who agreed to speak with me on the condition that I describe him only as a retired surveyor from the high desert. He did not work on this road, but he knows people who did or knew them because some of them are dead now. He told me that in the late 1960s, there were several road projects in the eastern Mojave that were funded through federal accounts that did not appear in standard appropriations records. He was not certain this road was one of them. But he said the specifications I described, the base depth, the culvert sizing, the lane geometry, were consistent with what he called program infrastructure, which is a phrase he used carefully and declined to define further. A rancher whose family has grazed cattle in the area since the 1930s told me the road was always just there. He could not remember a time before it. His grandfather mentioned trucks on it in the early years, government trucks, he thought, though he could not be more specific than that. By the time this man was old enough to drive, the road was simply a feature of the landscape, like the wash crossings and the creosote flats and the mountains on the horizon. It was there. Nobody asked why. What was it for? Now we get to the question that everyone who has spent any time thinking about this road eventually arrives at, and the honest answer is that nobody knows for certain. But there are theories, and some of them are more interesting than others, and at least one of them is supported by enough physical evidence that dismissing it requires a certain motivated effort. The mining theory is the easiest one and the least satisfying. The Eastern Mojave was heavily prospected in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. There are documented mineral deposits in the Providence Mountains, in the New York Mountains, in the ranges north of the road's terminus. It is not impossible that someone built this road in anticipation of mining activity that never materialized, a speculative infrastructure investment on federal land under a lease arrangement that was later abandoned. The problem with this theory is the quality. Mining companies, as I said earlier, do not build to federal highway specifications. They build to the minimum standard necessary to move ore. If you are going to spend $4,1965 on a road to a potential mine, you are assuming a level of ore value and extraction volume that would have required a significant public environmental review, even by the standards of that era. There is no such review in the record. There is no mining claim in the immediate area that was ever developed at scale. The water theory is more interesting. The Mojave is crossed by several large federal water infrastructure projects, the Colorado River Aqueduct being the most famous, but there are others: groundwater monitoring networks, potential diversion studies, emergency supply route studies conducted during the Cold War when federal planners were genuinely thinking about what happens to California's water supply if someone bombs the main infrastructure. A road built to access and service remote water monitoring equipment would be built to last. It would be built to federal specifications, it would be managed quietly, and it would become unnecessary or at least reclassifiable as monitoring technology improved and the specific Cold War concern that prompted it faded. And then there is the third theory, which is the one that the physical evidence at the road's terminus pushes you toward whether you want to go there or not. At the northern end of the road, where the asphalt ends at what appears to be a prepared turnaround area, there is a concrete pad. The pad is approximately 60 feet by 40 feet. It is reinforced, poured to significant depth based on the edge exposure where erosion has undercut it slightly. There are anchor bolt patterns in the concrete that suggest equipment was mounted on it, heavy equipment, the kind you bolt down rather than just park. The equipment is gone. The bolts have been cut flush with the surface. But the pattern of the anchor points is consistent with, though not exclusively associated with, communications or sensing equipment of the type deployed at remote monitoring stations during the Cold War's infrastructure buildup period. Someone built a pad, mounted something on it, connected it to a road substantial enough to service it indefinitely, and then at some point removed whatever was on the pad, cut the bolts, removed it from every map, and left the road and the concrete as the only evidence that any of this ever happened. That is not a mining road. That is not a water road. That is something else. The erasure, let me tell you how you make a road disappear from a map, because it says something important about the relationship between infrastructure and institutional memory. In the American Public Mapping System, roads appear on federal topographic maps when reported by the relevant land management agency. The BLM reports roads on its land. The Forest Service reports roads on its land. Roads on federal land can be removed when the managing agency submits a request indicating the feature is no longer relevant to public navigation. That process is not secret. It is documented in USGS mapping standards and has been used for legitimate reasons many times. Roads that washed out, roads closed for environmental protection, roads that simply stopped being roads. What is unusual here is not that the road was removed from the map, it is that the road was not closed. You can drive it today. It is in better condition than many county roads that appear on every map and are maintained with public funds. A road removed from the public record because it is no longer a public route should not be in this condition. Either someone has been maintaining it, which requires an ongoing budget commitment from some entity not advertising its interest in the road, or it was built to a standard that has allowed it to maintain itself for 50+ years through the thermal cycling and flash flooding of the Mojave. Both explanations are remarkable. Neither is comfortable. The maintenance question is where the mystery sharpens. Local BLM staff told me they do not maintain the road and have no record of maintaining it. They were not evasive. They simply did not know about it the way you would expect a land management agency to know about significant infrastructure on land they administer. One ranger had never driven it. Another had once and described it as being in surprisingly good shape. He had no explanation for why. Something maintains this road, we do not know what. what the road knows. The desert is a better archivist than most institutions. Paper burns, records get redacted, misfiled, retired to storage facilities that are themselves forgotten. But asphalt is a physical object, and physical objects accumulate evidence of their history in ways that are difficult to erase completely. The road tells you things if you pay attention. The culverts are stamped with manufacturing dates. 3 of them, where the stamp is still legible, bear dates between 1964 and 1967. Consistent with the Cold War infrastructure buildup that followed the Cuban Missile Crisis, a period when the federal government was spending serious money on hardened infrastructure, some of it publicly announced, some of it not. A highway materials engineer who examined photographs and core sample descriptions told me the asphalt composition was consistent with federal specifications from that period and inconsistent with anything a county or private contractor would have used. Federal spec, she said, without knowing anything else about the road. Then there are the concrete footings. Along a 12-mile stretch in the middle section, 3-foot square pads spaced at regular intervals on the western shoulder. Whatever stood on them has been stripped down to the concrete. The spacing is consistent with checkpoint locations, not utility infrastructure. Someone checked credentials on this road. That detail alone rearranges the picture considerably. The end of the asphalt. At some point, you have to drive to where the road ends because the end of a road tells you more than its beginning. The terminus is anticlimactic in the way that the most significant things often are. There is no dramatic cliff edge, no river, no mountain wall. The asphalt simply ends. It ends at the prepared turnaround with the concrete pad I described earlier in a shallow valley between 2 low ridges of volcanic rock that are exactly as dramatic as you are not imagining right now. The mountains you can see from the terminus are 15 miles away. The sky is enormous. The silence is the particular silence of the Mojave at midday, which is not really silence, but the absence of human sound within an environment that is itself making a constant low-level noise if you stand still long enough to hear it. Wind, insects, the thermal creaking of rocks expanding in the heat. Beyond the end of the asphalt, there is a trace. Not a road, not even a track in the formal sense, but a line in the desert where vegetation is slightly sparser, where the soil surface is slightly harder, where something once passed regularly enough to leave an impression that the desert has not entirely healed. The trace runs north for maybe a quarter mile before it disappears into a rock shelf that would not preserve surface evidence of passage regardless of how frequently it was used. Whatever this road was built to reach, the last quarter mile of reaching it was done on foot or by vehicle capable of traversing bare rock. The road brought you to the edge of something. It did not take you inside. I have stood at that terminus twice. Both times, I had the specific feeling that I was standing at the last publicly accessible point of something that extended further than I was going to be allowed to go. That may be projection. The desert does things to your sense of narrative significance. You stand in enough empty space and you start attributing meaning to rocks. But the concrete pad is real. The cut anchor bolts are real. The checkpoint footings are real. The blank space in the USGS record where the road should be is real. These are not feelings, these are objects and absences, and they form a pattern that points in a direction, even if I cannot tell you with certainty what is at the end of it. Here's what I keep returning to. Roads are built for reasons. The reasons are sometimes grand and sometimes petty and sometimes catastrophically wrong about the future, but they are always reasons. You do not spend $40 million equivalent dollars threading engineered asphalt through 40 miles of inhospitable terrain because you are bored. You do not post credential checks on a road to nowhere. This road was built with intent, maintained with purpose, and removed from the public record by deliberate decision. Every physical characteristic points toward a federal program of some kind. Every administrative characteristic points toward a federal program that was not intended to be publicly traceable. These programs existed. The Cold War infrastructure record is full of them, funded through non-standard channels, built by crews under confidentiality requirements, managed in ways that minimized public visibility. Some have since been declassified. Others remain in the gap between what can be proven and what can only be inferred from the objects left behind. The Timbisha Shoshone understood something that the people who build secret infrastructure in the Mojave have to keep relearning. The desert does not keep your secrets. It keeps your objects. It has swallowed the name and the purpose and the paper trail of whatever this road was and left the road itself standing in the sun, waiting for someone to explain it. Nobody has yet. The concrete pad sits empty. The cut bolts catch the afternoon light. The asphalt runs 40 miles to a cattle guard on a state highway, connecting something with no name to a world that does not officially know it exists. The road knows the answer. It is not telling.